Blessing of the Lord be upon you.
We bless you in the name of the Lord.
Thank you. We are studying again the intertestamental period of history. Doing it, or at least starting off, looking at it through the perspective of Daniel's prophetic visions. And we've already looked at Daniel chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar's dream. Last week we looked at Daniel chapter 7, Daniel's vision of the four beasts. And today we're going to look at Daniel chapter 8, Daniel's vision of the ram and the goat. Notice that this takes place about 550 BC. So this vision that he has takes place before the exiles return to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple, then rebuild the city. It's still in the time period of the Babylonian kingdom. So it's amazing how that God allows Daniel to see these things, and the reaction of Daniel as he understands what's going to happen in the history of Israel. So Daniel chapter 8 verses 1 through 27 is Daniel's vision of the ram and the goat. And chapter 8 verse 1, in the third year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared to me, Daniel, after that which appeared to me at the first, and that was the four beasts. So you get a continuation of it. This is going to be more specific to a time period. And this vision is going to consist of three parts. In Daniel chapter 8, verses 2 through 4, he says, I saw in the vision, and when I saw, I was in Susa, the citadel, which is in the province of Elam, or Elam. And I saw in the vision, and I was at the Ulai Canal, a ram standing on the bank of the canal. This ram has come to Babylon. Remember, Babylon is the kingdom, the empire that is in place at that time. So there's a ram that's going to come to Babylon. It had two horns, and both horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher one came up last. The ram charged westward and northward and southward. So if it charges westward, northward, and southward, where must it have come from? From the east. So that's an important clue to what is going on. Let's just do some reading here, starting with verse 2. Again, we kind of got verse 2 there. And verse 3, I raised my eyes and saw, behold, a ram standing on the bank of the canal. It had two horns, and both horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher one came up last. I saw the ram charging westward, northward, and southward. No beast could stand before him, and there was no one who could rescue from his power. He did as he pleased and became great. So, again, he did as he pleased. What is this a sign of? It's a sign of a new kingdom, a new empire that's arising, that's going to be very powerful. It's coming from the east, and it's going to charge northward, westward, southward. It's going to take a great chunk of territory, and no one's going to be able to stop it. So, what does this look like? this is a little bit changed. Because we're talking about Babylon. And we kind of get an idea of where Babylon was. Babylon's in between Persia and Greece. But Persia comes in and destroys Babylon. We've studied a good bit about that. Remember the preaching on the handwriting on the wall? This night your kingdom's going to be given over. Well, that's when the Medes and the Persians take over Babylon, and they're not really referred to in this passage, or that's not referred to in this passage. But this is getting on into this time period that at the time of Persia, the children of Israel, the Jews, are allowed to go back and rebuild the temple. The Persians, the Medes and the Persians, allowed for religious freedom. You go back to your nation, you rebuild your temple. In other words, they kind of ascribed to this idea of each nation had their personal God. You need to go back and rebuild that to your personal God. So the Jews loved the Persian Empire. In fact, we've talked about how, like with Mordecai was a very important Jew. He didn't go back and take his cousin, Esther, with him to Jerusalem. They stayed in the Persian Empire. He probably had a business. He was an important person there. They had security. But what happens? Persia is going to be destroyed. Something is going to come. See, from the east comes Persia to destroy Babylon, but now there's going to be something that comes from the west to destroy Persia. Following along what I'm talking about? So this is really what the vision of the ram and the he-goat is all about. So verses 5 through 8. As I was considering, behold, a male goat came from the west across the face of the whole earth without touching the ground. The goat had a conspicuous horn between his eyes. See that conspicuous horn between his eyes? Now, that ram over there, which represents Persia, it's got two horns, but notice they're kind of like a bighorn sheep, right? But that's that conspicuous horn. And this is going to play an important part in this vision. He had a conspicuous horn between his eyes. He trampled on the ram with two horns. When the goat became exceedingly great, the great horn was broken off. 4 conspicuous horns came up toward the 4 winds of heaven, north, south, east, and west. Okay. So, this what is it called? A goat? Let me go back here. Yeah. The goat with the one horn. Why does he come to destroy Persia? It's one of those things that I've talked about. One of the first things, I hate to use the word things, one of the first elements of world history that I think I learned really was when Xerxes, the Persian, tried to invade Greece. He had a huge army, he had a huge navy. He goes up, he goes north, south, north, west, and south. He comes from the east, and he's pushing that ram with the two horns, and he pushes, and he tries to go into Europe. And we had a map up here, you'd see where Asia, and we talked about it, you talked about it mainly in the book of Acts, and we talked a little bit about it in Romans and Galatians, where from Asia Minor over to Greece, you've got that area of water. He had enough ships that he could put his ships across there, and his army could march across on the ships. But he gets to Greece, and that's when the city-states of Greece kind of bind together under, I believe, Philip of Macedon, and they defeat Xerxes and drive him back. And Philip of Macedon begins the Grecian Empire. He dies, and his son takes his place. His son is Alexander, and he's called Alexander the Great. And that's who this goat with the one conspicuous horn represents here.
Persia was they were one of the dominant conquering countries for years and years, weren't they?
Yes.
Historically, they had been very powerful and pretty much ruling
Each of these nations, when you start with Assyria, then Babylon, then Persia, then Greece, and then the Roman Empire doesn't go so much east, but they control all of the Mediterranean.
Right.
Yeah, it just gets bigger and bigger as you go on. And I might have a map here later on to show you for that. But this is what his dream is showing. So when the goat became exceedingly great, no, I'll wait and show you a map later. All right. When it becomes great, it's broken. If you remember the story of Alexander, he was a young man when he starts off. He's a great military general, but he's going from west to east, and he gets over into like where India is today, and he thinks he's conquered the world, and he either dies of something like malaria or he dies in a drunken stupor. One of the two. So when he dies, he's the king, he's the emperor of the the Grecian Empire. Who's going to replace him? They divide the kingdom. The Grecian Empire, conspicuous horns are that go to the four winds of heaven. So, Daniel chapter 8, verse 9 through 13, then, the little horn oppresses Israel. Oh, let me go one step and show you what happens, all right? And what's being prophesied here is in the latter times of the kingdom, we're eventually going to get to Antiochus 4 Epiphanes, or Epiphanius, right? You have the Grecian Empire that started by Alexander. Well, Philip of Macedon kind of pulls together. Alexander takes it to its full greatness. But when he dies, remember there was one horn. And when it's broken off, 4 horns come up. You have the Ptolemies that take Egypt and North Africa and parts of the Middle East. We would say Syria, or not so much Syria, but Jerusalem would be under their control. Judea would be under their control. Cassander, I'm not so much familiar with that part in that name, but you have 4 parts, and this might be more what they would call Thrace up in Asia Minor. Lysimachus, Greece itself. But the Seleucus and the Seleucid Empire, this is everything, what we would call Syria today, clear over into India. This is huge, right? But out of that comes this one horn. Antiochus IV Epiphanes, I use that term, and he's a rather evil individual. We'll study more about him as we go down through. But see, that's kind of an artist representation of what is going on here. This division into 4 empires. And they should be working together. But that's not what's going to happen. Under Antiochus IV Epiphanes, he decides he wants to rule the whole thing. No, that's okay.
Sure.
Yeah, that's okay. He decides he wants to rule the whole thing. So, verses 9 through 13. Out of one of them came a little horn, which grew exceedingly great toward the south. All right? So, if you picture this, and that's why that, wrong way. This is east, this is south, this should be north, and this is north. This is, you know, on a map, Greece is up here, Asia Minor's up here, this is the Seleucid Empire, down here is Egypt, this is the Ptolemies. All right. What's going to happen is Antiochus, when he comes into power, he's going to constantly war with the Ptolemies. He's going to defeat them and take over that area. But he's still not satisfied. He's going to attack these areas up here. And that's where his defeat comes, eventually. When he gets up here, he meets somebody greater than the Greeks. Can you guess who that would be? I'll leave that to your imagination. All right, so where are we at here? But he exceedingly great, which grew exceedingly great. He's in the east, toward the south, toward the east, and toward the glorious land. Well, what's the glorious land? Palestine, but especially Judea, where the Persians have allowed the Judeans to come back, rebuild the temple, rebuild the city. He's got his eyes on that. So the little horn oppresses the vassal nation of Israel, and under Antiochus Epiphanes, or Antiochus IV Epiphanes, oppresses the vassal nation of Israel and controls the priesthood and temple. Under the Persians, they were allowed to rule themselves, but as a vassal nation. You got to pay us taxes. We'll protect you. But when the Persian Empire's gone, what happens? They lose that protection. Now here comes Antiochus IV Epiphanes, and hey, I'm the boss here. I tell you what to do, and I'm going to interfere in your ruling, not just who your leaders are politically. I'm going to interfere in your worship. A prince from the priests arises to reclaim and cleanse the temple. This is that time period that we've talked about a little bit, the Maccabees. You've heard the book of Maccabees. It's in the Apocrypha. It's basically a historical account. I've been doing a little bit of research on it. You have 4 books of Maccabees. Maccabees 1, Maccabees 2, Maccabees 3, Maccabees 4. Okay? Maccabees 4 is kind of like the last one written. It just gives you a generalization of them. Maccabees 3, the way I'm understanding it, Maccabees 3 talks about the earliest part, Maccabees 2, the middle part, Maccabees 1, the last part. It's like they're in reverse order and how things happen. There's a reason why they're not considered a part of the Bible, the canon. Some accept them, but most, and we certainly don't, because they're not Holy Spirit inspired. They're historically, they got some stuff there, but there's some other things about it that just aren't. And especially Maccabees 4, I believe that was maybe even written after the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. Why it's totally rejected. I'll do more study on that. But a prince from the priests arises, and that's where you get into like the hammer. The hammer, they called him. And he was a priest. He was a priest that didn't like it that Antiochus IV Epiphanes was interfering with, here's who's going to be your high priest. And he's going to do what I want him to do. He didn't like it, so he started this revolt. But in these instances, the temple would be defiled for 2,300 days. You see that in the text?
Verse 14.
Let me get back there. Okay, let me read verse 13. Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to the one who spoke, "For how long is the vision concerning the regular burnt offerings?" Okay? So the Jews had, every day they were supposed to offer a burnt offering for the nation, for the priesthood, for the rule, whatever. But because the temple's defiled, they can't do that. How long is this going to happen? That's the question at hand. For how long is the vision concerning the regular burnt offering, the transgression that makes desolate, and the giving over of the sanctuary host to be trampled underfoot? And he said to me, for 2,300 evenings and mornings, Then the sanctuary shall be restored to its rightful state. All right. This is where a lot of the commentators, scholars looking at this, well, this must be the AD 70 destruction of Jerusalem. No, it's not. This is not the great tribulation that's talked about in Matthew chapter 24 and the other passages in Mark and Luke that correspond to that. This is the 2300 day. This is a period of time during Antiochus IV Epiphanes when the Jews are actually fighting a war against this oppression. And it takes them a long time, but eventually Antiochus Epiphanes gives up. Because he hears something. He hears something. He hears a rumor. And he pulls his forces off to fight somewhere else, and that leaves it possible for the Maccabees to be successful in taking back over their little piece of ground there and the temple. But when he's kind of elevated to king, and this is where you probably heard me talk about the Hashmonean kings, right? You have a priest and a king being the same person. The high priest is a king. Now you start a revolt in your own nation because, hey, that's not supposed to be unless what? Unless that's the Messiah. And he ain't no Messiah. Okay? All the signs aren't there and the time isn't right. So those are things that are going on in this time period. We just want to hit the highlights for right now. So, let's see. The temple will be defiled for 2,300 days, but it's going to be defiled, but what? It's going to be restored, which is totally different than AD 70. The temple's going to be defiled and it's going to be destroyed. And Jerusalem destroyed. The Judean scholars say the economy. When they say something like the economy, you're talking about the whole civilization of that nation and that people being destroyed. It's gone. What is over there today is not what was there before, by any means. You follow me? So, I think when we started, the vision consists of 3 parts. So the one part was, here comes Persia to a degree. Here's Persia's coming. Second part, Greece is coming. The third part is, here's what's going to happen to Israel in this time period. Those are the 3 parts. But now you get into the interpretation. And this is in verses 15 through 26. Verses 15 through 17, when I, Daniel, had seen the vision, I sought to understand it. So I've given you a lot of information that he didn't have, right? So he's trying to figure this out. What does this all mean? And behold, there stood before me one having the appearance of a man. And I heard a man's voice between the banks of the Ulai, and it called Gabriel. You know who Gabriel is? An archangel, yes. Make the man understand the vision. So he, that's Gabriel, came near where I stood, and when he came, I was frightened and fell on my face. But he said to me, understand, O Son of Man, that the vision is for the time of the end. For the time of the end. What end?
It'll be the end of the Grecian.
Okay, start with the options. Is it the end of the world?
No.
No. Is it the end of the Roman Empire? Is it the end of Israel, Judea, the Jewish economy?
It's talking about the end when Christ, the end that's made when Christ comes. Does that make sense?
No, it's not even that.
Okay.
It's the end of the Grecian Empire, the end of that goat that had the one horn that was broken off, and then the four horns, and the little one that grows out. And that's going to be explained down through here. And that's why when scholars, this is the end of the world. This one, no, it's AD 70. No. You got to consider the whole thing together. All right. Now what? Okay, verse 18. And when he had spoken to me, I fell into a deep sleep with my face to the ground. But he touched me and made me stand up. So the angel Gabriel appeared to Daniel as a man, which that happens frequently, right?
Not uncommon.
Not uncommon. Verses 19 through 26. But I don't have that, oh, I just have like, what, probably 19 here. Let me look. In 19. He said, behold, I will make known to you what shall be at the latter end of the indignation. For it refers to the appointed time of the end. The indignation. What's the indignation? The 2300 days when they can't offer burnt offerings, burnt sacrifices at the temple. Because of who? Antiochus Epiphanes. Right? Okay. This indignation refers to the appointed time of the end. The end of what? That comes up again. Well, the ram with the two horns is the kings of Media and Persia. We talked about that before, right? The ram with the two horns curled up. The goat and great horn is the king of Greece, whom we know as Alexander the Great. On Alexander's death, the empire was divided into 4 parts, given to 4 generals. So you have the Seleucids, the Ptolemaic, and you have the Thracians and the Grecian. I'll just say the Grecian, the one where Greece was. All right? We'll get more to those in a moment. So Antiochus Epiphanes of the Seleucid Empire took Syria from the Ptolemaic Empire. He appointed the high priest and defiled the temple. The Maccabees arose and freed Judea of Antiochus Epiphanes' control. Antiochus Epiphanes attempted to conquer the Grecian homeland. He crossed the Hellespont as Xerxes tried to do. Xerxes tried it, what, about 490? Now we're talking about 150? Would that be right? 150, somewhere along in there? I'd have to look back and see exactly, but you're talking about a long period of time. Because Greece ruled for a long period of time. No, he crossed the Hellespont, but was defeated in the battles of Thermopylae in 191 BC and Magnesia in 190 BC. You wonder where you get milk of magnesia from? Right? When the Greek city-states were aided by the army of the rising, guess who? Roman Republic. The Roman Republic, not the Roman Empire, but the Roman Republic. In 63 BC, the Roman ruler Pompey made Syria what was part of the remains of the Seleucid Empire, a Roman province. That's 63 BC. So the vision was for the time of the end of the third great kingdom, the Grecian Empire. Look at verse 27. What does that say? And I, Daniel, was overcome and lay sick for some days. Then I rose and went about the king's business, but I was appalled by the vision and did not understand it. So I'm giving you the overview of what's going on there. You can read down through it and you can and pick up if you know this much about it, understand this much about it. You catch the drift of that. Can you understand why Daniel was so upset? He came to Babylon under the Babylonian Empire, who had destroyed Jerusalem. He's seeing these visions. Remember, this is before Babylon is destroyed. This is, what did we say, something like 550. It's going to be another 11 years before the Medes and Persians conquer Babylon. But under the Medes and Persians, they have religious freedom. They're allowed to go back and rebuild the city, the temple, and then the city. The Jews are flourishing, even though they're a vassal state. And that lasts for a good period of time. But then here comes the Grecian Empire and a period of oppression once again. Yeah, you've got a temple and you've got your city, you've got your nation, so to speak. It's still a vassal nation, but now you're in the middle of this war between the Ptolemies in Egypt and the Seleucids, who are fighting over this area. We talked about how that area where the promised land is, how important that was to the trade routes between Africa and Asia and Europe. So they're fighting over that, if for no other reason, so they can tax all that commerce through there. And the ports, it's now, we talked about Xerxes' navy, but now you're getting to the point really where the traffic on the Mediterranean Sea is getting to be so great, the trade. That becomes even more important. You're not just having caravans coming through, you're having caravans come there, you're putting it on ships and going all over the Mediterranean. That's a lot of taxation money there. That's a lot of power and control. So there's God's people, and they're stuck in the middle of this. And you can see why Daniel is so upset. And then here comes the Roman Empire. And he's already interpreted the vision of Nebuchadnezzar that happened probably about before 590. about this last empire that what? It's terrible. It's iron and clay. It tears down everything else. It's very oppressive. It's teeth of iron. He's not even going to be around when it happens. But it's his people. We pray for the generations to come, don't we? Here's Daniel. You can see why he's so upset, what this happens to him. How many times does it happen? Does it occur? Next week we'll look at chapter 11. Talk more about the kings of the north and the south. But really that's going to be Antiochus Epiphanes and the Ptolemies. Develop some more of that along those lines. All right, you need to see, let me go back and how's that? Looky there. I had that for later. But here's what I was talking about. After Alexander's death, he has no children to pass it on to, so it's divided to four of his generals, so to speak, four armies, and they take this. So you have Greece itself, the original place, Thrace, up here in the Balkans, I guess that's what this is, and then Asia Minor. You have Egypt and down into Ethiopia, which is the Ptolemies. And over here, look at that Seleucid. And over here is where the Persians were. Here's where the Babylonians were. Here's where the Assyrians were. You see how that kind of grows each time. There's a new kingdom. But then with the Roman Empire, the Romans never really come too much further than here. And that's where you read about the Parthians that they're fighting with. That's over in here, but they take everything around the Mediterranean. And that's why it's called Western civilization. The Occidental, this is the Oriental, this is the Occidental. But, notice how this is red in here? It just keeps shifting. As these people, these two kingdoms here fight, they're stuck right in the middle of it. Do you have any questions? Isn't it amazing how Daniel is seeing these things? And in some instances, almost 400 years before it happens.
And, I talked about his distress or illness because of his, he wasn't understanding it. And that alone can make a person very ill, just confusion. If he goes through all of this, and then when he looks back at it, he's still so confused, he becomes ill. Right?
And then when you put the pieces of the puzzle together, the Nebuchadnezzar's dream, the four beasts, this, and now you get another piece next week. And after that, when we get to the 70 weeks, it's just like, if we knew when the United States of America was going to end and how it was going to end, how would we feel?
Sick.
Okay. Thank you for your time and attention. We'll quit there for today and start next week.